Hello, here we are again. Happy 5th of July and happy 4th if you were celebrating it yesterday. I'm Tad. I will be here for probably the next hour. Only interesting thing to report because, of course, not of course, but we had a very quiet 4th of July at home. Not because we are un American or not patriotic, but simply because, for a variety of reasons, we've had a super, super busy, exhausting week and just didn't really feel a huge urge to go out anywhere and do anything. Unlike a lot of folks on the East Coast here in America, not because of the weather or anything, just various other things. Deb's been under the weather this week. Nothing serious, I hasten to say. She will be fine again. But as a result, I have been essentially dog and house sitting while Deb was laid up, and I'm a bit exhausted myself. Dogs, particularly, are used to having two humans so that they can come to us for attention anytime they want to, and one of us is almost always upstairs. Because that has not been true, well, Deb's upstairs, but she's been in bed and with the door closed to keep the dog from trampling her. Um, because of that, the young Lemon, has been chewing things again, which hasn't been as much of a problem lately, but at the moment it is because there's not enough people paying attention to her. So she has chewed up a bunch of stuff. I can't be angry with her. It's her way of dealing with frustration. She is otherwise a very sweet tempered animal. Johnny, of course, doesn't bother to chew up anything. Johnny never has been a chewer. And he also, unlike Lemon, is not a ball chasing dog either. So Lemon, when nobody is around to throw her ball for her and keep her occupied, starts looking for things to do, and it gets dangerous. So, anyway, so that's the update. Everybody is basically going to be fine or are fine now. What else did I want to talk about? It was for those of you who are in America. It was, of course, 4th of July weekend. Unfortunately, for in many places, including in San Francisco up the road where I was last night, it was very foggy and it kind of screwed up the fireworks. And in other places, it's so warm or stormy or combinations thereof that they actually had to evacuate people from various celebrations, which is unfortunate. But other than that, like 250 years, it's not much when you compare it to, say, the Empire of China, or but it's pretty good. 250 years, only a few major slip ups along the way, and I still have hope. I have hope for my country. I am a patriot. So I think that we can undo all or at least most of the mistakes that we have made in the last however long, and I believe that we can be better. And I kind of have to believe that because otherwise I'd have to go live somewhere else, and I really want to keep living here because I grew up here and because I care about this country. But that is of little relevance to what we're going to do tonight, except in so much as it's just part of what's par for the course with me. What we are going to be doing tonight is reading in just a few minutes. I'm going to be going back to River of Blue Fire, and we are going to be continuing on with the adventures of Rini and Kabu in the Bug World, which is my shorthand for it. I don't think anybody actually ever officially refers to it as Bug World. It's Kunihara's extremely complicated, extremely realistic entomologist playground, where the human Sims are tiny, 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 smaller even than most of the bugs, and certainly smaller than the big bugs by a long shot. And so we're going to be going back to that and some other stuff with the rest of the main characters. And we might even get to one of the characters that we haven't read yet in this volume. I think she or they show up in the first volume, but I can't remember. But they definitely show up in this volume. So we'll either get to them tonight or maybe tomorrow night or next week at the very latest. So what else is there to tell about? Yeah, Nah, nothing, not much. As I said, I went up to San Francisco last night. One of our kids was kind enough to give me tickets to a summer league basketball game. In for those of you not familiar with this stuff, the summer league is a sort of a tryout league for the professional team. Our local professional team is the Golden State Warriors, and so because it was the opening night, they had a lot of their, including some of the younger players who had already played some on the main professional team, but some others who were rookies who just got drafted this year, including one who everybody is very excited about. And it was great. It was great fun. I have not been to the auditorium in question, Chase Center, for a sporting event before. I've only been there for a concert. But it was good fun, and we had a really good time. This was my friend and I went. Deb was not up to it, and nor, I mean, she would have enjoyed it, but she wasn't up to it. So, anyway, anything else to tell about? No, just the normal stuff. Working when I can work, dealing with all kinds of weird inflammatory issues, but they'll get better, I'm sure, or they won't get better, and they will have to freeze me like Walt Disney and save me as a human popsicle for a day in which they can thaw me out and make all of my my inflammation go away. But until that rather desperate occasion, I will remain here, and I will remain unfrozen, and we will continue doing what we do. And that is what you guys help me out with. And as a result, I am going to go check and see who has made their way in to say hello, and then I can say hello to them in turn. So hang on, let's get this little baby up running where it's supposed to run. There we go. Okay, good. So let us check in. I see Rosalba left the first message that I have here saying, good morning from Milan. So good morning back to you and Milan. Petra is here, says, lovely to be back, and we are glad to have you, Petra, as always. Mark Redmond checking in from Yorkshire. Hello, good morning to you. Wouter Vandenberg is checking in. Elbow update, still broken, but Dutch doctors are less eager to operate than Austrians. So at least 4 weeks of braces. Uncomfortable but manageable. Well, good, and fingers crossed for a quick recovery. Penny Davies, hello, hello, good to see you. Andre, hello, as always, nice to have you with us. Nicole, and good morning to you too. Iris, hello, Iris, nice to have you with us as well. There's Mr. Mark Craigbaum. Hello, Mark. Good to see you. There is my mother-in-law, Hazel. Hello, sweetie. Good to see you, too. Hello. We're all doing okay here, and your wife is my wife, your daughter, is holed up in the back room, but otherwise she's doing well and coming along well and in good spirits. Alexandra Lirop. Hello. Good to see you. Nice to have you with us. Chris Fobb, as always, stalwart and important. Thank you, Chris, for all your help. Phil Parkman. Hello, Phil. I think that might be a new name. Nice to have you with us. Isaac Tim. Surprised you're reading. Hello, night people are mostly Europeans. Why are you surprised I'm reading? Because it's 4th of July? I mean, you know me. I read pretty much unless something goes desperately wrong. And Isaac has been up the last 3 days finishing a nasty flu. God, I'm sorry to hear that. Alive people. Yes, we are all more or less alive. And Isaac, I hope you're feeling better, and I hope you will continue to get better soon, because the flu is no fun. And I certainly know this. We had a horrible flu right after our second child was born. And basically what happened was I had to take our older kid, who was 3 at the time, and he and I basically lived in the living room while Deb was in the back room because she was nursing, and so she was giving her antibodies to the baby. But all the rest of us had everyone except the baby had the flu, and it was just 9 kinds of miserable. I mean, I remember like just sitting on the couch with poor sick boy in my lap, and we would both just kind of pass out and wake up, and an hour had passed or 5 hours had passed or whatever, and it just went on like that for days, and we're kind of stumbling around trying to keep some kind of connection with real life. Fortunately, none of the kids were supposed to be in school at that. They were both, one was an actual newborn and the other was only 3. So we didn't have to worry about dealing with that kind of stuff, but didn't have to leave the house much. But it was no fun. And I have had flus since, and I do not recommend them. So once you've already got one, you have my sympathies, Isaac. I hope you feel better soon. Okay, so anything else I wanted to talk about? No, not really much. This has been a kind of a lost week in terms of work and stuff like that, and mostly spent on helping Deb and just dealing with various family and domestic mini crises. So without further ado, I'm going to start reading. For once, not stretch it out inhumanly far. Excuse me. We are in the section of the book where Rini and Kabu and their 2, I guess you would say, hosts or guides from Bug World, who are 2 entomologists. One of them, Lenore, and the other one is named Cullen. And Lenore, after they crashed their dragonfly plane while trying to observe an Eciton swarm, they were hit from the side by a bird, if I remember correctly. And the plane, their dragonfly plane crashed. And at that point, once they'd all finally extricated themselves from the rubble, the wreckage, that's the word I wanted. Once they'd extracted themselves from the wreckage, the Eciton swarm, Eciton or army ants, was almost on them and literally destroying everything in its path. And at that point, Lenore, basically, who still thought that this was a normal a normal simulation, and that no matter what happened, she could always just drop out of it again, refused to go with them and flee the Eciton swarm. And you can imagine what happened. She was just lying there. Anyway, so I will not describe that in detail because it's mentioned in passing in the next section. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to continue on. So Cullen and Rini and Kabu are heading back toward the hive, as it's called, which is the entomological research center in the middle of this otherwise completely natural simulation or sim world, I guess you'd call it. I'm saying that like I didn't call it sim world 1,000 times during the course of the book, but I haven't read the book in a long time. So okay, anyway, so that's where we are. And Cullen still thinks as a matter of fact, Cullen has just said in the previous paragraph, I don't understand you people anyway. You act like this was all real. There's no point in going anywhere. There's nowhere to go. And Rini says to him angrily, you are the one who doesn't understand. Because Rini already knows something about how impossible it is to get out of the simulation now, ever since the stuff started to happen in Atasco's world, where Rini and the others first met. So, continuing with River of Blue Fire. It was like walking across a battlefield, Rini thought. Far worse than it had looked from atop the leaf. Where the Eciton swarm had traveled, the micro-jungle was absolutely empty of any living thing but plants, and only the largest of those had survived undamaged. At ground level, the ants had left behind only skeletonized stems and a scattering of tiny, unrecognizable fragments of matter. Cullen, who was leading them up the hillside toward the hive, had been silent since Rini's explosion. More likely because he believed she was dangerously crazy, Rini suspected, than because he trusted her judgment about what was going on. She didn't even know exactly what to believe herself. Had they really seen a woman brutally killed by giant ants? Or had they only watched the playing out of a simulation, an imaginary human form dismembered by imaginary insects, with a human dropping out of the puppet body, like Stephen or one of his friends when they lost a combat game? Stephen, of course, is Rini's younger brother. But of course, the last time Stephen had played an online game, something had changed, and he had never come back. Who could say for certain that Lenore had made it back to real life either? or that Rini or Kabu or the young entomologist stalking tight-lipped in front of them would survive a similar piece of bad luck. Kabu descended from a quick foray up the curling length of a creeper.
The ants have passed on. I cannot see any of them near the hive building.
Rini nodded.
That's one less thing to worry about. I hope we can fly one of those planes. It's a long, long walk back to the river, and even if we don't run into the ants again, I don't fancy our chances.
Kabu looked thoughtful.
We know that something is wrong with this network, Rini, and now it seems it has gone wrong for others just besides us. Besides just us. It does seem that way. But what could make this happen? Our friends could not go out of this Otherland place, could not go offline, and now these people cannot either, and they have nothing to do with our search as far as I can see. There's something gone seriously wrong with the whole system.
Rini shrugged.
I can't even guess. We don't have enough information. We might never have enough information because, from what Sellers said, there's never been a system like this.
Oh, shit! Cullen had paused at the crest of the lower hill. Before him, the hive lay, open and plundered. The great windows across the front had been smashed inward, likely by the sheer weight of the ant swarm. The ants had carried out all kinds of objects, but seemed to have rejected many of them, seemingly at random. The promontory in front of the building was littered with virtual objects from inside, sections of wall and bits of furniture and specimens from the museum being among the more recognizable. There were less pleasant remnants as well, bloodless bits of the simulated bodies the hive's human inhabitants had once worn, strewn all across the landscape. Torn, or snipped from the original owners, they looked less real than they had when part of a sim, like a scattering of doll parts. But it was still horrible. Cullen stared at it so bleakly that it seemed he might never move again. Rini took his arm and urged him forward. They passed through one of the sliding hangar doors, which had been pried upward until it had crumpled, and thus allowed them more than ample headroom. Now it was Rini who felt her insides go cold and heavy. The hive's small air force, perhaps because of the plane's resemblance to insects, had been shredded by the Essiton army. Only a few recognizable pieces remained, and these were not enough to cobble together a patio chair, let alone a flying machine. Rini wanted to cry, but would not indulge herself.
Are there any other planes?
I don't know, Cullen said bleakly. Angela's Hopper, maybe.
What's that? Where is it?
Rini. Kabu stood at the hangar door, looking out over the debris-carpeted hillside. His voice was strangely pitched.
Rini, help me.
Alarmed, she turned and sprinted to his side. Something very large was making its way steadily up the slope toward them, a bright green thing the size of a construction crane. It swiveled its triangular head from side to side as though searching aimlessly, but it was stalking steadily toward them.
It is him,
Kabu spoke in a hushed, clenched-throated whisper.
It is Grandfather Mantis. No, it is not.
She wrapped her hand around his slender baboon foreleg, trying to stay calm despite the terror spiking sharply inside her, rattling her heart in her ribcage and squeezing out her breath.
It's another simulation, Kabu. It's just a regular praying mantis.
If something the relative size of a Tyrannosaurus could be in any way regular, she thought wildly.
It's another one of Konohara's bugs.
That's not fair. Cullen's voice was flat. That's a Sphodromantis centralis. They're not indigenous to this environment. They're from Africa. Rini thought this was pretty rich coming from the man who'd brought in European robber ant spray, but With the mantis a few dozen paces away and closing, it didn't seem like a good time to discuss VR ethics. She tugged at Kabu's furry arm. "Let's get out of here!" "Unless it's supposed to have come in on a ship," Cullen murmured. "That's how they got to the Americas in the first place." "Jesus mercy, will you shut up? Let's—" She broke off. The mantis had turned its head toward them, and now began striding faster up the hillside, scythe-like forearms extended, a vast machine of razoring clockwork.
"What do those things eat?" Rini asked faintly.
"Anything that moves," said Cullen. She let go of Kabu and shoved Cullen several steps back into the depths of the hangar.
"Let's go! You said there was a plane or something. Angela's plane, you said. Where?"
"Her hopper. On the roof, I think. Unless she took it."
"Right. Come on."
She looked back.
"Kabu!" she shrieked. "What are you doing?"
The baboon was still crouching beneath the crumpled hangar door as if waiting for death. She sprinted back and picked him up, a not inconsiderable effort after the long day carrying Lenore.
"It is him, and I have seen him," he said into her ear. "I cannot believe this day has come. It's not a him, and it certainly isn't God. It's a giant monkey-eating bug. Cullen, will you get goddamn going? I don't know how to get to the roof. You do."
As if suddenly waking from a dream, the entomologist turned and ran toward the back wall of the hangar with Rini a step behind him. As they reached the door that led inside, the simulated metal of the hangar door gave a protesting screech. Rini looked back. The mantis had almost entirely forced its way in and was pulling its long abdomen and back legs through the gap. The head pivoted in a horrible, robotic fashion as the blank green domes of its eyes tracked their flight. The door into the complex was unlocked and slid open at a touch, but there was no way to bar it behind them. Kabu stirred in her arms.
I am all right, Rini," he promised. "Put me down."
She let him clamber down, and they all sprinted toward the door at the far end of the corridor.
"Why don't we just go there?"
Rini asked Cullen as she dodged bits of simulated debris.
"You don't have to do things like walk and run here, do you?"
"Because it's not working, damn it," he shouted. "I tried. Kunahara turned off the protocol or something. Just be glad we made elevators. We had elevators made for this thing in case he ever changed his mind about how many corners we could cut in here." The elevator was on their floor, its doors partially open, but Rini's moment of hope was quickly ended. The doors themselves were bowed outward, as though something inside had tried to smash its way free. As they stared, something large and dark heaved, and the parted doors clanked and quivered. One of the ant soldiers had been trapped inside and was battering the elevator to pieces. Cullen shouted with frustration and fear as he slid to a halt. They all turned at a loud, grinding noise in the corridor behind them. The wedge-shaped head of the mantis had pushed open the door from the hangar, and the doorframe itself was crumpling as the creature forced the rest of its massive body through the opening. "Stairs! Back there!" Cullen pointed at a branching hallway back down the corridor.
"Let's go, then."
Rini grabbed at Kabu's furry arm in case he was struck by another bout of religious devotion. The mantis tore away the last pieces of the doorframe. As they ran toward it, the huge green thing stepped into the corridor and rose until its antennae brushed the high ceiling, a giant museum display come to murderous life. Rini and the others reached the cross corridor and turned the corner so fast they skidded and almost fell on the slippery floor, but Rini knew the monster could cover the distance to them in only a few strides. She let go of Kabu and began to sprint.
"Hurry!"
she screamed. Her friend was on all fours, matching her pace, Cullen a few steps behind as they slammed through the doors and into the stairwell. Rini cursed when she saw that the staircase was too wide to be a deterrent to the pursuing monster, but she prayed that the steps might slow it down. She eased her own pace a little and shoved Cullen ahead of her, in case he might suddenly remember a better route. They had only reached the second landing when the mantis knocked the doors spinning off their hinges below them. Rini looked down as she leaped up onto the next set of stairs, but wished she hadn't. The creature had begun climbing straight up the middle of the stairwell, bracing itself with long jointed legs against both stairs and walls. Its blank headlight eyes watched her hungrily, so close it seemed she could reach down and touch the armored head. "Try the doors!" she screamed up to her companions. Kabu rattled the latch of the third landing door as they dashed past, but it was firmly locked. "It's only a few more floors to the roof," Cullen shouted. Rini shifted herself into a more careful gear, struggling to avoid slipping. She doubted that any one of them would survive a tumble. Their pursuer was only a couple of meters beneath them, filling the stairwell like a demon rising from the infernal pit. Then, for a moment, the creature actually reached past her. The end of a vast green leg rose and touched the staircase wall above her head. Terrified, Rini could only throw herself down against the stairs and crawl underneath it, positive that at any moment one of the forearms would close on her like a giant pair of pliers. But the mantis slipped its hold and sagged, then fell back half a floor before it got a grip against the stairwell again, and she began to feel they might actually outrace it to the roof.
"Jesus mercy," she thought suddenly. "What if the way onto the roof's locked too?"
As she staggered onto the last landing, Cullen was rattling the bar of the door with no effect. She could hear the creature clambering toward them again, a leathery creaking and popping like the world's largest umbrella being unfurled.
"It's locked!"
Cullen screamed. Rini threw herself against the door, slamming the bar. It popped open, revealing a broad vista of late afternoon sky.
"Not locked, just jammed."
It was a prayer of thanksgiving. She stepped to the side as Cullen stumbled backward through the doorway, Kabu at his feet and tugging him. The great green head of the mantis rose up out of the shadows of the stairwell behind him like a tri-cornered moon. A leg scraped across the stairwell landing as it sought a firm foothold.
"Where is the bloody plane?"
she shouted at Cullen. The scientist regained his equilibrium and looked around, his eyes panicky wide.
"Over there!"
Rini slammed the door closed behind him and took the thorn from her belt. She jammed it through the handle, knowing as she did so that it was a straw in a hurricane, then sprinted after the others toward a wind wall that ran halfway across the gray roof, hiding whatever might be on the far side.
"Are you sure it is there?"
she shouted. Cullen said nothing, running flat out. As if in answer, something went pop behind her. The thorn shot past, skipping across the rooftop, followed by the grating sound of another doorframe being wrenched loose. As they reached the edge of the wind wall, she heard the door burst outward. Despite the overwhelming fear, Rini was also furious. How could an insect be so single-minded? Why hadn't it given up long ago? Surely a real mantis in the real world wouldn't behave in this monster movie fashion. She half suspected Kunahara, some kind of horrible payback he had built into his simulation for those who ignored nature's power. On the far side of the wall, with the panorama of the oversized forest looming above and beyond, Cullen was already dragging the tarp from a lumpy object not much larger than a minibus. Rini and Kabu each snatched at a corner and pulled. The covering slid away to reveal an expanse of brown, yellow, and black enameling, a six-legged monstrosity shaped like a sunflower seed.
"It's another damn bug."
"A semiotis. All our vehicles look like bugs." Cullen shook his head sadly.
"Angela didn't get out, I guess."
He thumbed the latch panel, and the doors swung upward. The entomologist pulled down the steps, and Rini clambered into the snug cockpit. As Kabu swung up behind her, a shadow fell over them. Rini whirled to see the mantis step around the edge of the wind wall, massive legs lifting and falling with the terrible precision of sewing machine needles, head swiveling high above the hopper. Cullen stood frozen at the base of the ladder as the great head descended toward him. In that stark, timeless moment, Rini could hear air hissing through the spiracules along the creature's side. "That spray!" she tried to call, but only huffed a little air through a throat clenched shut by terror. She found her voice. "Cullen! The spray!" He took a stiff pace backward, fumbling in his pocket. The head tilted as it followed him, smooth as if on oiled bearings. The great scythe-like arms came up and extended past him on either side with terrible deliberation, until the tip of one touched the side of the ship with a faint metallic ping. Cullen held up the cylinder in a trembling hand, then blasted a spattering stream into the blank triangular face. The moment exploded. The mantis juddered back, hissing like a steam compressor. The arms snapped down as they retracted, smacking Cullen to the ground. Then the creature crabbed backward several steps, sawing at the air and its blinded eyes. Rini saw Kabu swing back down to the ground and grab Cullen by the collar. The entomologist's arm remained behind, lying on the roof as if discarded in a forgetful moment, still swaddled in a jumpsuit sleeve that now gaped raggedly at one end. You are not Grandfather Mantis?" Kabu shrilled at the monster as he struggled to drag the scientist away. "You are only a thing." In the depths of the nightmare, operating on pure instinct, Rini scrambled down to help. As the mantis convulsed above them, they heaved Cullen into the plane and pulled down the door. Rini could see their pursuer through the side window, still ratcheting in place like a broken toy, but becoming less manic and more purposeful by the second. There was no blood where Cullen's arm had been. She grabbed and squeezed anyway, not sure what the rules were for near-mortal virtual injuries, and screamed, "How do we make this hopper fly?" Cullen's eyes fluttered open. "It hurts," he said breathlessly. "Why should it hurt?" "How do we fly the damn plane? The thing's coming back." In wheezing monosyllables, Cullen told her, then passed out. She left Kabu looking for something to bind his wound, then thumbed the buttons he had mentioned in what she hoped was the right order. The vehicle shuddered as its wings rotated out from under the wing case, then vibrated into swift beating life. Rini managed to get the legs moving to turn the head of the vehicle away from the wall and out toward the edge of the building. As the hopper swiveled, the scarecrow form of the mantis heaved into view before the view screen, groping toward them. Rini said a silent prayer, pulled back on the wheel, and gave the hopper all the throttle she could. It jumped, slamming Kabu and Cullen back against the padded cabin wall and rattling Rini in her pilot's seat, then skimmed upward just out of reach of the mantis's last stabbing clutch. Within moments, the wreckage of the hive was far below. Rini tugged the wheel a few times, once beginning an alarming dive, then at last found what she wanted. They banked and then flew on into the towering forest toward the setting sun. "That was not Grandfather Mantis," Kabu said solemnly behind her. "I forgot myself. I am ashamed." Rini began to shiver, and for a moment she feared she might never stop. "Box," she said, still shuddering. "Jesus mercy." Chapter 8. Fighting Monsters. Netfeed. People. One angry man dies. Visual. Gomez answering reporters' questions in front of courthouse. Voiceover.
Nestor Gomez, who referred to himself in court as just one angry man, died in a hospice in Mexico City, aged 98. Already in his 60s and retired from his factory job at the time he first came to fame, Gomez was celebrated as a hero by many after he machine gunned a car full of young men in a rest stop outside Juarez, Mexico. He claimed that the youths had been harassing him. Visual, charred wreckage of car. Even more controversial than the killings was an eyewitness claim that Gomez set fire to the car while some of the wounded victims were still alive. His Mexico City trial ended in a hung jury. 2 subsequent trials also failed to reach a verdict. Gomez was never tried in America, even though all 5 victims were Americans. Visual, Gomez being greeted at airport in Buenos Aires. For years after the incident, he was a featured speaker at meetings of anti-crime groups in many countries, and the expression "to Gomez" became synonymous with violent and even excessive retribution. "It seems scanny," Frederick said, enjoying the shade of a grass stem. I mean, I know we don't need to eat or anything, but it just doesn't seem like morning without breakfast. Orlando, feeling vastly more comfortable than he had during the worst of the fever, shrugged. "Maybe there's a coffee bar down the river someplace, or a puffed rice plantation." "Don't even talk about it," Sweet William grumbled. "No coffee, no fags. That means ciggies, just so you nice Yank boys don't get confused. This is hell, as some Shakespeare bloke said it, nor am I out of it." Orlando grinned, wondering what William would think if he knew one of the Yank boys was really a girl. But for that matter, how did they know Sweet William wasn't a girl himself, or that Florimel wasn't a boy? "So what do we do?" Quan Li asked. "Where do we go? Should we not look for the others?" "We can do anything that we want." Florimel was just returning from a scouting trip up the riverbank, with T4B hissing and clanking at her side. "But we had better stay off the water for a while. The fish are feeding." Even the stories the others had told him about the splashing frenzy that had sunk their leaf boat could not dim Orlando's good mood. He clambered to his feet, still a little weak, but better than he'd been in days, and brushed the dust from Thargor's coarse-woven loincloth. It was funny how, when you looked close enough, or got small enough, even dirt had its own dusty residue. Dirt particles so small he couldn't even have seen them, when he had been his normal size, bumped together and were ground down finer still. He supposed it would go on, smaller and smaller, until you got down to the size of molecules, and even there you would find bits of microlint in the molecular wrinkles. Utterly scanbark, as Fredericks liked to say. "Do we have any idea of where Rini and her friend, Kabu, whatever his name was, where they might be?" Orlando asked. I mean, did anyone see them after they went in the water?" "They are still alive." Everyone turned to look at Martine, who was huddled against the stones, grains of beach sand, if Orlando and the others had been normal size, that the travelers had piled to make a windbreak for their night shelter. Her sim looked a little less ragged and careworn today, although Orlando wondered if he might be projecting some of his own heightened spirits. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I can just tell. I can feel them, I suppose." Martine rubbed at her face so hard it seemed to change shape, and for the first time Orlando saw what seemed like a true measure of her blindness. He didn't think a sighted person would make a gesture that seemed so private. "There are not words for these things, but I have always used non-visual methods to work with information. Yes, you understand. That is how my system is designed. Now I am getting things I never have before, new and very strange information, but slowly, too slowly, because it is a painful process. It is starting to make some sense.
She turned toward Orlando.
You, for example, you are sounds, yes. I can hear your clothes rubbing skin and your heart beating and you breathing with a little, how would you say, bubbling in your lungs from your sickness. I can smell the leather belt you are wearing and your own person scent and the iron of the sword. It is rusting just a bit, by the way.
Orlando looked down, embarrassed. Thargor would never have let his sword go untreated after a prolonged immersion. He scooped up a handful of fine micro sand and began rasping the blade clean.
But that is only part, Martine continued. Now I have other information coming to me, and there are not names for it. Not yet, anyway. What do you mean? Asked Quan Li worriedly. What is coming? I mean that what I experience, I cannot put into words yet. It is as if you tried to describe color to someone blind like me. She frowned. No, that is not correct. Because there was a time when I could see, and so I remember colors. But if you tried to describe red or green to someone who had never seen any colors at all, how would you do that? You, Orlando, I can feel also as a set of ripples in the air, but they are not ripples and it is not air. They are things that tell me an Orlando-shaped thing has to be somewhere nearby. And I feel this forest as numbers, in a way. Little hard things, millions of them, pulsing, talking to one another. It is so hard to say.
She shook her head, pressing a finger against her temples. Sorry, let me say that again. She shook her head, pressing fingers against temples.
The whole of this network, it is for me like being in a river of information. It tosses me and spins me and it almost drowned me. But I am beginning to understand a little of how to swim.
Oh, dang, said Fredericks, a drawn-out exhalation. But far scanny, too.
So you're sure that Rini and the baboon man are still alive? Orlando asked. I can, yes, feel them. Faint, like a very distant sound. I do not think they are close, or perhaps I am only sensing some residue.
Her face went slack in sadness.
Maybe I have spoken too soon. Perhaps they are gone. I sense only where they once were. So you can tell us all apart with what, sonar? Florimel sounded angry, perhaps a little frightened. What else do you know about us? Can you read our minds, Martine?
The blind woman spread her hands as if to ward off a blow.
Please, I know only what I sense, and that has no more to do with what goes on in your thoughts than someone who looked at your face would see, or someone who heard your voice. So calm down, Flossie, Sweet William said, grinning. My name is not Flossie.
The look on her virtual face would have curdled milk.
It is a bad joke, if it is a joke.
But who are you? Orlando asked. Who are any of you? The others turned toward him. I mean, I still don't know who any of you are. We have to trust each other, but we don't know anything about the people we're supposed to trust. Now it was William's turn to be sour.
We don't have to do aught. I, for one, am not planning on making a career out of this lark, and I don't care what dreary, dreadful things y'all used to do with your spare time. Well, that went very Devonshire. Whatever.
That's not good enough, Orlando said. Look, I'll
I'll tell you the real truth. My name is Orlando Gardner. I'm 15 years old. Not for another 3 months, said Fredericks. Just a teenager? What a surprise. William rolled his eyes. Shut up. I'm trying to do something. Orlando took a breath, getting ready. I'm almost 15 years old. I have progeria. It's a disease, and it's going to kill me pretty soon. As when he had confessed to Fredericks, he felt a certain exhilaration, the cold splash of a long-dreaded jump from the high board. Don't say you're sorry, because that's not what's important. William arched an eyebrow, but remained silent. Orlando hurried on. And I've spent years on the net doing gaming, and I'm really good at it. And for some reason, I stumbled onto this whole thing, and I don't know anyone who's sick because of it, but it's what I'm going to do now. And it's more important to me than anything else has ever been. Finished, he felt a flush heating his real skin, and hoped that it would not call forth a twin on his virtual face. No one spoke. My name's Sam Fredericks, his friend said at last into the uncomfortable silence. And I'm 15 too. But I really am 15. Fredericks smiled almost shyly at Orlando. I'm here because Gardner brought me here, but I'm just as trapped as if I were here to save somebody. Fen, I guess I am here to save somebody. Me, us. Orlando, despite the embarrassment of having his age corrected, did not point out Frederick's omissions. He, or she, would wear the face he wanted, as would all the others. And I am Martine Derubin, the blind woman said. I am a researcher. I have been blind since I was 8. An accident. I live by myself in the Haut-Languedoc, in the southern part of France, near Toulouse. I came with Rini and Kabu and Murat Shegar Singh, who was killed when we entered the Otherland network. She nodded her head as if to punctuate the dry recitation. Orlando heard the empty places in what she said, but again did not question. For scanning this. T4B had his arms crossed across his spiky chest. You want to know my ID for what? You in net news? Good God, I can speak clearer English than that, Florimel said, and it is not my native language. Just tell us what you're doing here, Orlando pleaded. What's your real name? Ain't telling no names. He glowered insofar as a cartoonish chrome battle mask could be made to glower. Here for my shadow, me, my ziz. What does that mean? Asked Quan Li. A friend he hangs out with, translated Orlando, who had a young suburbanite's fascination with goggle boys speak. Not no friend, T4B said indignantly. He my shadow. We from the box together. They're, sort of in the same gang, Orlando explained to the group's only certified grandmother. So, T4B, what happened to your friend? Came to this scan palace to find out, didn't I? The robot said. My Zizzy's in the hospital. Found him almost sixth on the floor at his cot. Thought it was charge burn, but he was togged into like the mama-papa net. Orlando was feeling increasingly ludicrous, but he soldiered gamely on with his translation. He says his friend is in the hospital, just like Rini's brother. At first, when they found him, they thought it was charge damage, but he was connected to the regular net. In fact, isn't T4B a kind of change, my dear Bang Bang? Asked Sweet William. You ain't dumping. The robot's voice took on a kind of sullen rapture. Far tasty jolt, T4B. Go to heaven straight. My name, my fame, see? Lord help us, William said. He's a charge, Ed. That's just brilliant, isn't it? T4B brandished a spiny fist. Brilliant this, funny boy. Oh, stop it.
The high spirits with which Orlando had begun the morning were beginning to fade, and the sun was not all the way into the sky. Quan Li? Hasn't everybody heard my poor story already? She looked around, but no one spoke. It was my granddaughter. Quan Li fell silent for a long moment. Jing, Jing, my pretty little kitten, my dear one. She too fell into a sleep like Rini's brother, like this man's friend. I have tried long and hard to discover the reason. She seemed uncomfortable to have everyone listening to her. I live in New Kowloon in Hong Kong, she added. Is that not enough to say about someone like me? I am very, very old. Orlando smiled, but he doubted she could be as shy and polite as she acted. It could not have been easy to push forward until she found this place, with her whole family telling her it was pointless and foolish. Who else? I'm only doing this because the river is not yet safe, said Florimel. At other times I will not be convinced to talk when there are things to do, and I do not think it is particularly important who we are. She said the word with mocking emphasis. You know my name. My last name is not important. I am originally from Baden-Württemberg. My home now is outside Stuttgart. Orlando waited, but there was no more forthcoming. Is that all? What else do you need to know? Why are you here? It was Fredericks who asked this time. And where did you learn to do those things you did to Orlando? Are you a doctor or something? I have some medical training, but I am not a doctor. It is enough to say. But why are you here? Orlando prompted. All these questions. Florimel's sim face drew its eyebrows together in a fierce frown. I am here because a friend became ill. You may ask more questions, but you will get no more answers. Orlando turned to the man in black. And you? You know all you need to know about me, Chuck. How did Bang Bang, in his infinite wisdom, put it? My name, my fame? Well, this is what you get, this name, this face. And just because you've contracted some exotic soap opera illness and we're all sorry for you, doesn't get you any more than that. The teasing edge of Sweet William's normal tone was gone. He and Florimel both appeared ready to fight rather than to divulge more about themselves. Well, it's better than nothing, I guess, so now what do we do? Orlando turned his gaze out to the roiling green river. Go downstream? And if we're going back on the river, how? Our boat, the Leaf, it sank. Perhaps we should try to find Rini and her friend, said Quan Li. They may need our help. I hardly think that a bunch of people the size of orange pips should waste too much time wandering around searching for other tiny people who may or may not be there in the first place, declared William. You lot might enjoy being eaten by something, but I like my pleasures, especially the masochistic sort, more refined. We need to stay close to the river, don't we? Fredericks asked. That's how we get out of this place and into another simulation. Well, I'm all in favor of getting out of this place as fast as friggin' possible, William said. First smart thing, you, T4B nodded vigorously. Let's get flying. Don't want no more low fish swallowing me. Just like that, demanded Orlando, outraged. His own vulnerability had made him sensitive. We just take off and maybe leave Rini and her friend hurt or lost. Look, sweetness, William growled. First off, you are going to have to learn the difference between real life and one of your action adventures. For all we know, they're dead. For all we know, some horrible earwig the size of a bus
of a bus may come round the corner any second and pinch all our heads off. And we'll be dead too. Really dead. This is not a hooray for elves story. I know it's not a story. But even as he spoke, Orlando regretted that it wasn't. If he were really Thargor, and this were the Middle Country, it would be time for some serious smiting. That's the point. We're in trouble. Rennie and her friend are in this with us. And in case you didn't notice, there aren't a whole lot of us to spare. I think what Orlando says makes sense, Quan Li offered. Fredericks and T4B now joined the argument, although it was hard to hear what either was saying in the general din. Orlando fought an urge to stick his fingers in his ears. Were any of these people grown-ups? Stop! Martine's voice was hoarse. The others paused, halted as much by the evident pain beneath her words as what she was saying. Perhaps we can find some sort of compromise. We will need a boat, as Orlando has said. Perhaps some could begin building such a boat while others looked for our two missing friends. Jang, yeah, I could work on a boat, said Fredericks. I did it when we were on the island. It worked too, didn't it, Orlando? Oh, sure. It stayed above water for nearly half the trip. Fredericks rewarded him with a punch on the shoulder. That is fine, said Martine. For me, I feel I should be among those searching for the others. I would be little help with building. Quan Li volunteered to accompany her, as did Florimel. After much argument, Sweet William and T4B decided to help gather material to build the boat. After all, William pointed out, there's not a lot of difference between getting eaten up while searching or getting eaten up while doing construction. We will return before the sun goes down, Martine promised. Yes, but if you do come back after dark, William said, try not to make noises like a giant bug, or we might stick you with something sharp by accident. Building the raft of reeds with Fredericks had been one thing. Orlando had been deathly ill through most of that process, and what little work he had done, Fredericks had directed. Now he felt himself again and found he was part of a very fractious 4-person committee. Fredericks wanted to build another raft, but William pointed out, quite correctly, Orlando had to admit, that even a large raft was not going to be heavy enough or deep-bottomed enough to keep them afloat on the river. At their size, even the river's milder moments of choppiness would be like a terrible storm at sea. But Fredericks proved stubborn, as he often did. He felt that the raft experiment had worked once, although, as Orlando had earlier pointed out, even that conclusion depended on how you read the data, and that if they did not have the equipment or materials, to build anything more complicated. Orlando had to agree with him on the latter point. The disagreement rapidly degenerated into a bout of mutual recriminations until T4B accidentally made the best suggestion of the afternoon, and a plan began to develop. During the course of one short-lived moment of calm discussion, the robot Goggle Boy said that what they really needed was their old leaf back. A few minutes later, when Orlando had given up for a bit on mediating between Fredericks and Sweet William, and was staring up at the vast trunk of a tree looming over the riverbank like a cylindrical cliff face, T4B's words came back to him. Hold on, he said. Maybe we do need our leaf back. Or another leaf. Oh, sure we do, William said, rolling his eyes. And at the first thumping, it will go over, just like the last one, and we'll all swim the rest of the way back to the real world. Won't that be fun? Just listen. We could make a raft, like Frederick said, but put it inside a leaf, like a deck. That would give it some, what do you call it? Kitsch value, suggested William. Structural integrity. You know, it would brace it. And then we could make some outriggers like they have on Hawaiian canoes. Pontoons, is that the word? That would keep it from tipping over. Hawaiian canoes. William smiled despite himself, Pierrot's lips quirking at the edges. You truly are a mad boy, aren't you? What, do you spend all your time living in fantasy worlds? Think it's good, me, said T4B suddenly. Make one sixing boat, no dupping. Well, maybe, William raised an eyebrow. Pontoons, is it? Suppose there's no harm in trying it. No harm till we drown, that is. And that's where we're going to stop. Because it's a minute after 2. Hang on a second, let me just bookmark this. Okay. All good, all good. So, we are stopping for the night. I thank you, as always, for joining me, because I value that, and I value each and every one of you out there. All of the handfuls of people out there in the real world while I sit here at my desk in my extremely messy office. So I will be back at 7 p.m. to read some more, and we will probably go from Orlando to, I think, the other character I mentioned earlier, who is Calliope, the detective. And if you don't know it already, I will tell you a semi-amusing story about that tomorrow or later today. But until then, I would like to say that I hope you will take good care of yourselves, each and every one of you, that you will take good care of your friends and loved ones, keep an eye out for others who might need a little help from you in some way, shape, or form, and stay out of trouble as best you can, because there's enough trouble in the world. You don't need any of it. Nah. So, thank you again for joining me. It's always a pleasure to spend time with y'all. And I will see some of you at 7 p.m. And I will see some of you when the next one is recorded and Chris Fobb puts it up on YouTube. And until then, take good care. Hasta la vista, amigos. I will see you soon. Yeah. Okay. Ciao.